Section 2 of Above the French Lines by Stuart Walcott. This Librivox Recording is in the public domain. Stuart Walcott's Letters. Letters 1 through 11. 1. Aloud, July 4th, 1917. Dear H., my work here is going well, although slowly. Those in my class ought to get out by October if nothing goes wrong. There are some 150 Americans learning to fly now in France, besides the ones the government may have sent over, more than 100 at this one school, and the oddest combination I've ever been thrown with: chauffeurs, second-story men, ex-college athletes, racing drivers, salesmen, young bums of leisure, a colored prize fighter, ex-foreign legionnaires, ball players, millionaires, and tramps. Not too good a crowd according to most standards, but the worst bums may make the best aviators. There is plenty of need for all of them. There are lots of Frenchmen here also, and a big crowd of Russians, mostly happy youngsters having a very good time. They're always in a hurry to get up in the air and are continually breaking machines in their necks. The Americans have an endless streak of luck in being able to fall out of the air and collect themselves uninjured from amidst a pile of kindling wood, which was the machine. As yet I haven't done any piloting in the air, so can't talk very wisely about the glories and thrills of slipping through the ephemeral clouds. All I have learned is that almost any kind of a dub can be a pilot, but that there aren't a lot of very good ones. The idea is to get enough practice to become a good one before arguing with the elusive Boche at a high altitude. It looks over here as though there will be about 2 years more of war, judging from what most people say. It is to be hoped that after 12 to 18 months we will be able to take France's place at the front, for she deserves to be relieved and will have to be. Even now France is almost spent. It will be England and the United States who will finish the war. This war is a terrible thing, but for America it is an opportunity as well. I'm glad that we have at least come into it, and that it will be no halfway fight that we must put up. The Canadians have been about the best regiments in the war. Why shouldn't America be as good? Stuart. 2. École d'Aviation Militaire. Aloud, Cher, France. Friday, July 13th, 1917. You see, it's Friday, the 13th, my lucky day, and I'm happy because the work is going well. First, I'll tell you about a smash I had a week or so ago. The roller, or roller, class, which I smashed in, has the same machine as those that fly with a 45P motor, only it is throttled down, and we are supposed to keep it on the ground, just about ready to fly, but not quite getting up, a speed of about 30 miles per hour. When there is the slightest wind, we cannot roll, because the wind turns the tail around and swings the machine in a circle, a wooden horse, cheval de bois. I rode about the end of the list Saturday, and the wind had come up as the day got on. Work stops at 8:30 a.m. always, because there's too much wind. My first sortie or trip went okay with a considerable breeze on the tail, but on the second there was too much wind, and after I got going pretty fast, around she went. The wind caught under the inside wing, and up it went. Smash went the outside wheel, and a crackle of busting wood. All the front framework of wood that holds the motor was smashed. A pretty bad break. The monitor was a bit mad and talked to me in a bit of French. The next morning I was called in to see the chief of the Bellerote School, Lieutenant de Chavans, a very nice officer. He told me that my monitor was not satisfied with me, that he had told me to do something, cut the motor when the machine started to turn, 3 separate times, and that each time I had intentionally disobeyed, that if anything like that happened again I would be radiated, discharged from the school. That was quite the first I had ever heard of it, and I was so mad at the monitor that I could have kicked him in the head. I tried to explain to the lieutenant, but he never heard a word, so I just gurgled with wrath and didn't do anything. But yesterday we got another monitor who was a different sort. The class after roller is décollé. It is the same machine, but one gets off the ground about a meter or two, then slacks up on the motor and settles to earth. It is strictly forbidden to décoller in the roller class. This morning I had a sortie in the roller, and all of a sudden noticed that I was in the air a bit, managed to keep it straight and get out of the air without smashing. The monitor said nothing, so I décolled on all the sorties. When I got out, the monitor explained that it was strictly forbidden to go off the ground in the roller class, that I shouldn't have done it, and then asked me if I would like to go up to the other class. Whereupon, consenting, I am now in the décollé class, leaving 16 rather peeved Americans who arrived in the rouleur the same time I did, who can perform in the rouleur quite as well as I can, and who will remain in the rouleur for some time yet. They've no grudge against me, however, as it was only a streak of luck on my part. Later in the morning I had some sorties in the décollé, and got up 2 or 3 meters. The wind was too strong, so my trips were a bit rough, but nothing was damaged, so hurrah for Friday, the 13th. 3. July 17th, 1917. The work has been going very well since last I wrote you, which was only 2 or 3 days ago. I told you about it last leaving the blessed roller. I never was so relieved in my life. The first evening in the décollé class I was requisitioned to turn tails, and the morning after there was too much wind to work. The décollé is the one where you go up 2 or 3 meters and settle down by cutting speed. The first time I had 3 sorties in the wind, bounced around a lot, but did no damage. The next time was first thing in the morning, 2 meters up on the first, 4 or 5 on the fifth, strictly against orders. I even had to piquer, point the engine toward the ground a little, which is not at all comme il faut in the décollé. But these Frenchmen are funny chaps. Sometimes they will get terribly angry and punish one for disobeying, and again they will be tickled to death with it. If I had smashed while doing more than I was told to, there would have been a lot of trouble. As it was, no objection, and the monitor personally conducted me to the piquet class with a very nice recommendation. Now there are 2 piquet classes, one with a piste about a quarter of a mile long, in which one is supposed to do little more than décoller, get up about 5 meters, and piquer un tout petit peu, hardly at all. After comes the advanced piquet with a much longer piste, on which one can get up to 100 meters, 300 feet. On my first sortie in the piquet I was told to roll on the ground all the way, so, continuing my policy, did a low décollé. Next I was supposed to do a 2-meter décollé, so went up 10 and piqueted. Had 10 sorties in the class one morning, getting as high as I could, about 20 meters, and went to the advanced piquet that night. Last night. 4 sorties there last night with a machine with a poor motor, so it didn't get up over 100 feet. And this morning I did my first real aviating. There was a bit of wind blowing, so the monitor, Mr. Moses, only let a lieutenant and me go up, as we had gone better than the others last night. First it was a bit rainy and always bumpy as the deuce, air puffs in pockets which required the entire corrective force of the wing warp and rudder to overcome. My last sortie was decidedly active. The wind had developed into a bit of a breeze, which is to a baileron like a rough sea to a rowboat. 2 or 3 times I got a puff that tipped the machine way over, put the controls over as far as I could, and waited. Seemed a minute before she straightened. The trouble was that the machine was climbing and therefore not going very fast. If I had piqued, it would have corrected quicker. I had no trouble at all in making the landing. Hopping out of the machine, I saw the head monitor rushing over to Mr. Moses on the double, shouting volubly in French and berating him severely. I gathered that he had been watching my maneuvers, expecting something to fall every instant, and that he strenuously objected to Moses letting me go up. Work stopped there for the morning, and it was very fully explained to me what the trouble was. If I have some sorties there tonight, I go to Tour des Pistes, flying field, in the morning. I may be on Newport in 2 weeks. I'm now beginning to see the advantages of the baileron training. There is a great deal of preliminary work on or near the ground. In all other aviation training, such as at Newport News, 90% of the work is in making landings, in piqueting down, redressing at the proper moment, and making gradual connections with the earth. I haven't made a really bad landing yet, and the reason is that I have been in a machine so much on and near the ground that I have sort of developed a sense or feel of it, and almost automatically redress accordingly, and settle easily. Also, I can tell pretty closely what is flying speed because of the work on the rollers. It's the same way with all the other students, only I know it now from my own experience. And this morning I began to realize that my 100 minutes at Newport News was invaluable. I not only found out some of the tricks of a master hand, Karlstrom, but also developed a bit of confidence in the air and air sense, without which I would have gotten into trouble this morning. My bumpy ride this morning is absolutely invaluable. I'll probably never have so much trouble in the air again, because a fast machine or even a Bolero with a good motor would hardly have noticed these puffs. It was a bit risky, I guess, or the head monitor would not have been worried, but now that it's over, I know a lot more. 4. Dear Blank, you've certainly developed into a wonderful correspondent. Honest to goodness, a letter you started my way about a month ago is quite the most satisfactory and amusing thing I've received since I've been over here. Based on practically no material, yet it was alive with interest, every line. There's nothing like a finishing school education. If I thought you could knit, I would immediately appoint you as my marraine, godmother, for it's quite possible for one person to have more than one soldier, and I am but a soldier of the second class in the French army. As I understand it, the chief duty of a marraine is to write letters. You've started that in good style, and to knit wool scarves, which the devoted soldier hands to a French peasant woman to unravel and make a pair of socks out of. Many Yale boys have wandered in upon us of late, Alan Winslow, Wally Winter, George Mosley, and others, also Chester Bassett, late of Washington and Harvard University, who I believe has the good fortune to be acquainted with you. A very recommendable young man. They tell me that Cord Meyer is aviating at some camp nearby, but not having any machines, they have had to spend their time touring the country in a high-powered motor. Had a long and gossipy letter from Pat the other day, containing details of many weddings and engagements, even unto young blank blank. All my classmates are doing the same stunt. How about being original and waiting until the war is over and seeing who of the competitors are left? I quite expect to be, but it's luck I'm trusting to. There's a lot of war left in the nations of Europe. One can never tell. I may come home on permission in a French uniform with a wing on my collar. When the American air service is a little further along, it may be that we will be taken over from the French army. I finished up in one division of the school the other day and passed to another for brevet, the test for a military aviator. I sort of had the impression that I wrote you a few weeks ago about it, but not being sure, run the risk of repetition, which, if any, I hope you will excuse. This epistle is being written out at the piste, flying field, waiting for the wind to drop enough to fly, and with me seated amidst a bunch of Russians. So if there are any superfluous iskis or ovages in this, you will understand why. The Russians are great flyers. In fact, they know so much about it that they never listen to their monitors, and as a result break more machines than all the other pupils combined. A month ago, 5 of them went to the next school for acrobacy, and in a week every one of them had killed himself. I pulled a bit of the same Russian stuff in the spiral class of the Bolero. All the work is solo, never a flight double command, so one has to get instructions on the ground and follow them in the air. I used my head and senses in performing my first spiral, instead of shutting my eyes, doing what I had been told and trusting to God. The result was that I made one more turn than I expected to, and that being quite perpendicular, not at all comme il faut, in a Blériot. Why something did not break has been the wonder of the Blériot school, but nothing did, and we got down all right. Another time I planted a cuckoo on her nose, which is not at all encouraged by the monitors. 'Tis quite a trick to balance a monoplane on its nose on the ground, but I did it. Quite vertical she lay, with me in the middle, struggling with the safety belt, and wondering which way it was going to fall. My final appearance in the Blériot school was likewise spectacular. The left wing hit a hole in the air, which the right one didn't. Naturally things tipped. Then they wouldn't straighten, and the one thing to do was to dive to the low side. I did, but forgot to shut off the motor. A very steep and fast spiral resulted, in which I lost 500 feet in a half turn in about 2 seconds, I think, all with the motor going to beat the cars. I must have been traveling at many hundreds of miles an hour. Once again nothing broke, but it was no fault of mine that it didn't. Sincerely, Stuart. 5. August 25th, 1917. I started from my altitude test 3 days ago. The requirement is 1 hour above 2,000 meters. I got to 1,950 meters, and one cylinder refused to fire, so I was forced to come down. The next morning I tried again, got to 900 meters, and the magneto ceased to function, thereby stopping all progress. I glided toward home. but didn't have quite the height to make the piste, so had to land in a nearby field, just dodging a potato patch. A flock of curious sheep came around and carefully examined the machine, getting considerably mixed up in the wires of the open-tail construction, and leaving considerable wool thereon. When the mechanics eventually got the motor going, I started off. Didn't get quite in the air before the motor went bad, and then I ran into a bean patch, gathering about a bushel of beans with the same tail wires. Yesterday morning I tried again. Climbed to 2,014 minutes and to 3,500 meters, 11,500 feet, in 40 minutes. I went up through some light clouds, and when I got to 3,500, to the top of my recording barriograph, more clouds had formed, and I was practically shut off from the earth, nothing but a beautiful sea of clouds below me, a very beautiful sight. One other machine was in sight far below me, below the clouds, where the air was very much churned up, keeping me very busy. Just as soon as the time was up, I came down with a pair of very chilled feet, making the 2,000 meters in 5 minutes to the ground. No work since then on account of bad weather. This morning I attended my first Catholic funeral, that of the commandant of the school, who was the victim of mid-air collision, a very unusual accident. The other machine got down safely, though badly smashed. Everybody in camp attended the funeral in the chapel of the artillery camp next door. I understood none of the service, but the music by a tenor and a cello was excellent. While the cortege was going down the hill to the cemetery, a Newport circled overhead very low for half an hour or more and dropped a wreath. It was a very impressive ceremony. I expect to start on Triangle and Petit Voyage in a few days. When they are done, I will be breveted flyer in the French army. Then comes Perfection work and acrobacy, so it will be quite a while yet for me. 6. August 31st, 1917. Dear Blank, here it is almost September, and I am still a doggone élevé pilote. Verily, every time I think of how the time passes along without results, I go wild. My complaint is caused by the west wind, which has blown about 25 days during the month of August, and seems likely to continue well on into September. The only variety is an occasional storm. For the past 2 weeks I've been waiting to start my voyages, 2 trips to a town 40 miles away and back, and 2 other triangular trips about 180 miles long each. When they are done, one becomes a pilote élevé. And there's a great, if subtle, difference when the words are reversed. An élevé pilote is the scum of the earth, looked down on by mechanics, pilots, monitors, and everyone else. A pilote élevé can wear wings on his collar and is as good as anyone else. He is permitted to fly in rough weather, to take chances, and is not in so much danger of getting radiated if he gets in trouble. The proper thing to do on a triangle or petit voyage is to have something bust directly over a nice chateau, make a skillful landing on the front lawn under the eyes of the admiring household, and then be an enforced guest for a few days until one is rescued by a truck and mechanics. One has to be very careful where the panne de moteur catches him, lest he have to make his landing in a lake or on a forest, which is apt to be a bit awkward. One chap, an American, has been out on a triangle for 2 weeks, staying at some country place, and there are 4 others at another school near a big town waiting for weather to return. Reports give us to believe that they are having a much better time there than we are here. Between here and the point for the petit voyage, a little bit off the route, is the big future American aviation camp, and also an artillery camp. There are quite a bunch of fellows there, Quentin Roosevelt, Cord Meyer, etc., I think. Every American that has left on his voyages in the last month has stopped there against all orders, and been bawled out by the monitor. One has to keep a recording barometer or altimeter machine, a barograph, during the voyages, which indicates all stops. One chap came back home the other day with a barometer record showing beyond the shadow of a doubt that he had made a stop of about 15 minutes en route. The monitor saw it and said, "Allors, all you Americans stop off there. I don't like it." Then the chap tried to explain how he had a pond and come down in a field out in the country somewhere, fix the motor, and come on home. He almost got away with it, but the monitor happened to snook around a bit and noticed on the tail very clearly written a good Anglo-Saxon name, the name of the town and the date, quite indisputable evidence. I fully expect to have a pond there myself before long. By the way, to declare a short pause in my chronicle of aviation, how about all those letters that are to follow? If you try to tell me how good you are to your Belgian soldier, I refuse to believe a word until you treat me in the same way. And I also refuse to accept anyone as a marraine. Isn't that what you call these fairy godmother persons one is supposed to correspond with during the war and marry afterward? How inconsiderate some of them are, to take 3 or 4 soldiers, just assuming that not more than one will survive. However, they may be wise to have more than one iron in the fire. But my parenthesis grows apace. I say I refuse a marraine until she approves her ability. But let me see again. Does said marraine have to be a complete stranger? It seems to me that is customary, and also usually they are of different nationalities. All of the foregoing weak line will be interpreted as a mere plea for that other letter. I've never made this absence makes the heart grow fonder stuff at all. Even blank has given me up. I remain to her only another of the forgotten conquests of the dead past. This odd person Bassett wandered in all dressed up like a patch of blue sky, and I just had to let you know he was here. With absolute confidence in each other's integrity, we put our loving messages side by side. By the way, he is a good scout, don't you think? I have gotten to like him immensely since he has been here. I never had a better time in my life than one evening in Paris with Chet. However quiet the party, he is the life of it. It must be that I take my weekly shave in cold, cold water with a dull, dull razor. Oh, happy thought! Tell the father and brothers hello from me. Also tell Blank to drop me a line of what he's doing and when he's coming over. Stuart. 7. September 1st, 1917. The wild man in the Newport was out again this morning giving someone a joy ride. There is a long straight stretch of road in front of our piste, and he came down that several times, a nasty puffy wind blowing which bothered him not at all, flying only 2 or 3 feet off the ground. In front of the piste is a telephone wire crossing the road. He came along the road 100 miles an hour until almost on top of the wire, and jumped up just in time to clear it by a few feet. Really beautiful work. He goes all over the surrounding country flying low, hopping over trees and houses, sometimes turning up sideways to slip between 2 trees a bit too close together to fly through, sometimes dragging a wing through the space between a couple of hangars and doing vertical virages just in front of them. It doesn't seem possible that any man can be so much a part of his machine, can do it so consistently accurate that he never misses. For this chap, Lumiere, has never had a match. A chap named Lofgren started off on one of his brevet voyages a few days before I got ready for brevet. He got quite a ways along, ran into a storm, went above it, got caught in a cloud, kept on for quite a long way, being drifted by a strong wind, then came down through the clouds and found that they were only 400 feet above the ground. After a while he found a place to land and came down safely. He went to a farmhouse, got his machine guarded and tied down. In the meantime, word had spread over the countryside that an aviator had come down there, and the entire population came out to look him over. A grand equipage drove up with a count who lived in a nearby chateau. He insisted that Eddie come to the chateau and accept their hospitality. There the fortunate Ed stayed 5 days. The countess talked English, and also some house guests. He hadn't brought a trunk, so borrowed razor, etc. from the count. Went down to see the machine every day in the baronial barouche. Whenever he went to the little town in the vicinity, all the kids followed him around the streets. And when at last he left, he was presented with a multiple of bouquets and had to kiss each and every donor. He brought back pictures of the chateau, a delightful-looking old place, and numerous addresses. 8. At last the 2 weeks of wind and rain has ceased, and now it is perfect weather, a bit of a breeze and lots of sun for the last 2 days. Yesterday morning there weren't enough machines to go around, so I did not work, making the 8th consecutive day I hadn't stepped in a machine. Last evening I at last, and with much rejoicing, started out on my maiden voyage to another school about 60 kilometers away, 37.5 miles. It was delightfully easy, nothing to do but climb 2,000 or 3,000 feet and just sit there and watch the country unfold, comparing the map-like surface of the earth spread out below with the map in the machine. In good weather it is very easy to follow. Spot roads, towns, woods, rivers, and bridges. Railroad tracks get lost at high altitudes and are harder to find anyway. One has to keep an eye open for a place to land within gliding distance in case of a panne always, but the country is so flat and so much cultivated around here that it is absurdly simple. I endeavored always to keep some pleasant-looking house or chateau in range in case of trouble, for the French are proverbially hospitable to aviators in panne, lying to, descending. Coming back yesterday evening, the sun was pretty low and the air absolutely calm, nothing but the drone of the motor and the wind. The only movements necessary, an occasional slight pressure on the joystick to one side or the other to keep the proper direction. I came very nearly going to sleep. It was so peaceful up there. Several times closed my eyes and swayed a bit. As a matter of fact, one is perfectly safe at that altitude, anything over 1,000 feet, because the machine, at least this particular type, won't get into any position from which one cannot get it out within 200 meters at most. But nevertheless, I hadn't tried any impromptu falls as yet. This morning I repeated the same identical performance, because for some reason we have to do 2 petit voyages, and had much the same kind of a time as yesterday. On the way home, one cylinder quit its job and threw oil instead, covering me from head to foot and clouding up my goggles, so I had to wipe them off about every minute. When I got back, the mechanics decided that the motor had died of old age and would have to be repaired, so I am again without a machine. Having watched a beautiful afternoon pass by from the barracks when, without my luck, I'd be working. But with a machine and weather I can be finished tomorrow. 2 triangles to do, about 200 kilometers, 125 miles, each, and I can do one in the morning and the other in the evening, and then I'm breveted. Perhaps by day after tomorrow I'll start Perfezione on Newport. I hope so. 9. Since my last to father, I have had some very interesting times. First, I finished my brevet with very little excitement, made all my voyages, and only got lost a little bit once. Then I saw 2 machines on the ground in a field, made a rather dramatic spiral and steeply banked descent amidst a crowd of villagers, and got away with it. Then found the machines belonged to 2 monitors who were bringing them from Paris, and had effected a panne de chateau. Being asked what I was doing, I fortunately found a spark plug on the burn and got that repaired. The rest of it was very easy, a bit of flying in the rain, which stings the face a bit, but is not bad otherwise. Since I have been on the Newport, there are 3 sizes of machines on which one is trained, starting with the larger double command and going to the smallest. At Pau we get another even smaller, about as big as half a minute. 4 times I went out with a ride. Bad weather, crowded class, and busted machines, the same old story. Then last night I had my first rides with a monitor who is rather oldish, crabbed, and new at his job, a brand new aviator. As you know, when an airplane takes a turn, it does not remain horizontal, but banks up. Comme ça. If you can interpret that illustration, it shows signs of remarkable imaginative power. Allures, one banks to take a turn and uses the rudder only a very little because the machine turns along when banked. There is a sort of falling out feeling the first few times until one becomes a part of the machine. To get back to the story, this monitor does not like to bank his machine and sort of sidles round the corners, keeping it quite flat and almost slipping out to the outside of the turn. I've done many fool things in a machine and made many mistakes, but never have I been so scared in anything in my life as when riding with this monitor. A monitor is supposed to let the pupil drive as much as he is able, but this bird never lets me make a move, and when we got through, told me I was too brutal. I was never madder in my life, and cursed nice American cuss words all the way home. There's a 15-kilo ride in a seatless tractor back to camp to improve a bad humor. Well, this morning I saw some more rides impending and didn't like it, so asked the chef de piste to put me with another monitor. He had to know why, and I registered my kick, which practically said that the first monitor didn't know his business and couldn't drive, that I was scared to ride with him. The chef was a bit sarcastic and told me to take 2 rides with another monitor to show how I could make a virage. I did it the way I've been accustomed to, making a fairly short turn. When we got down, the monitor said, "Épatant," American, stunning, or something like that to the chef. The chef had meanwhile communicated my complaint to the first monitor, and he was the maddest man I ever saw. Demanded what "ce type-là," indicating me, wanted. Said the virages I had just made were dangerously banked. The monitor I was with didn't mind, though. Then all 3 started arguing at once at me, and I spelled all the French I knew. About that time I thought of what you had just told me in a letter about trusting in Latin, which advice and remarks I have come to agree with very much. My admiration for the French has waxed less daily, and here I realized that I had very successfully made a fool out of the man who was supposed to be my teacher, and he fully resented it. Then, of all things, the lieutenant, without further remarks, said I was to continue with my first monitor. My heart sank into my feet. I had visions of staying in that class without rides, or with only rides and fights, for months. I rode no more this morning, and what was my delight to find that this evening my bewhiskered pal had left on permission. I got another monitor, a fine one, who put his hands on the side of the machine and let me do everything with a bit of assistance on the landing, which is different from what I've been doing on the Caudron. 7 rides and a finish, the 23-meter tomorrow morning. It wasn't very good, but got by. 10. Things for me are going all right. Have made progress on the Newport since last I wrote, and will fly alone soon. As regards the U.S. Army, things are at a standstill until I get to Paris, which will be a week or so. I hope to go to the front in a French escadrille and in an American uniform. Some say it can be done, some that it cannot. It sounds so sensible that I am afraid there must be some regulation against it. 11. September 27th, 1917. Since last I wrote a regular letter, considerable has taken place. First, I am now at Pau, having finished up Aloud. Have sent postcards to father right along to keep track of movements. After brevet was over, I did not take the customary permission of 48 hours, but went straight to work on Newport. D.C. Double command. One cannot learn a great deal riding with an instructor, only about enough to keep from smashing and landing, because one never knows when the instructor is messing with the controls, when it's one's self. There are 5 kinds of Newports, differing mainly in size, the smaller being faster and more agile in the air, being adapted to eccentric flying. They are 28, 23, 18, 15, 13, the baby Newport. At Aloud I had about a week of DC on 28 and 23. The numbers refer to size of wings, with several days of no work, then some days on 23 alone, and finally on 18 alone. The landings are a bit different from those of the machines I had been flying, as they are faster, and the machines are quite nose-heavy. In the air, the nose-heavy feature makes them fly themselves, that is, according to the speed of the motor, the machine will rise and climb, or piquer and descend, with never a touch from the pilot. If the weather is not bad, the Newport will correct itself automatically from all displacements. But in landing, the nose-heavy feature causes a great many capotages. If the landing isn't done about right with the tail low, over she goes on her nose, or all the way onto her back. It is a very common occurrence and has become almost a joke. When a pupil capotes, everybody kids him. No one hurries over to see if he is hurt. Not at all. He climbs out from under, usually cursing, and in 10 minutes the truck is out to salvage the wreck. It is astounding the way smashes are taken as a matter of course. Yesterday one chap in landing hit another machine, demolishing both but not touching either pilot, being worth some $15,000 or $25,000, but no one seemed to worry. It's very much a matter of course. The monitor was a little peeved because he will be short of machines for a few days, but that was all. I've seen as many as 10 machines flat on their backs or with tails high in the air on one field at the same time. For myself, I haven't capoted or busted any wood since the Blériot days, but I'm knocking on the wooden table now. On several occasions it has been only luck that saved me, as I've made many rotten landings. Well, to get back to the diary, after finishing at Aloud, I waited around for 2 days to get papers fixed up, requested and obtained permission, and then decided not to use it, and left straight for Pau, after fond farewells to the friends I'd been with for 3.5 months. Looking back, I didn't have such a bad time at Aloud, after all, though I did get terribly tired of the living conditions. My trip to Pau I put down to experience. I discovered one schedule not to travel by in future. Leaving Aloud at 2:15, I got to Bourges at 2:45, and found that the train left at 7:29. Fortunately, there was another chap from the school on the train, Arthur Blumenthal, an old Princeton football star, whom I have gotten to know quite well, so we managed to waste the afternoon together. At 7:29, I started another half-hour's journey, at the end of which the timetable said that the train for Bordeaux left at 10:30. This is all p.m. At this town there were some American engineers, so I embraced the fellow countrymen in a strange land. Finished up a not very gay evening by attending the movies, a most odd institution. Clouds of tobacco smoke obscured the screen, and most of the action was around the bar at one side of the hall. Nobody was drunk, but nearly everyone was drinking and very gay. This was merely Saturday night in a small town of the provinces, not in gay Paris. At 10:15 I got in a first-class compartment and tried to find a comfortable position in which to sleep. At 2:15 a.m. I had mussed up my clothes considerably, lost my temper, and not slept a wink. Then we had to change again. The rest of the morning I sat opposite an American officer, a queer old fogey, and we tried to kid each other into thinking we were sleeping, with no success. Arrived at Bordeaux at 7 a.m. and found that the train for Pau left immediately, so I missed out on breakfast too. Oh, it was a hectic trip. My idea of a very unpleasant occupation is that of a traveling salesman in France. End of section 2.